Hi, this is Joanne, and this video is to be for parents and teachers, which is going to be giving the big picture of the kindergarten through 6th Catholic Anthropology initiative that we are starting. Before we get into the big picture, though, just some details about the format, etc. It's a question-answer format. That was just to make it simpler and easier to read. The illustrations are done by a 7th grader in the diocese, giving her gifts to others and spreading the gospel. So to Shaylin, thank you. Teachers will understand that it's a spiraled approach, so there will be repetitions as you continue up the grades with additions. And just another caution to say some of the concepts and words don't naturally flow off the tongue, and that it's going to take time and repetition. So I just ask you to keep at it because it will make sense after it gets time to sink in. The goal in this is apparent, but really it's that for our students to become what God wants them to be, and to have a sense of self, that they know where their dignity rests, and their values not on their abilities, their looks, their choices, okay, but in the fact that they are made in the image and likeness of God, and that they view every person in society that well, especially the vulnerable. That as they get older, they can interact in society well, responsibly, making a positive difference in whatever area God puts them. And as they get older in middle school and they start facing issues, whether it be in their own relationships in the cafeteria or then the bigger issues at hand. And there are always going to be issues, that they can have some foundations needed in science and in faith that can give them direction and a sense of security. There will be 2 other videos in addition to this. One video is going to be going over the terms, only the terms that where society teaches something different than the Catholic understanding. And that's going to be in terms like body, soul, emotions, things like that. We're going to go through some distinctions. All the other terms should be self-evident in there, even if you don't know them, the explanation's in there. The other video is going to be unpacking the term image of God. What does that really mean? Okay, so that's a whole other subject, right? So we'll be unpacking that in another video. So the big picture: what is Catholic anthropology? Why are we studying it? And why are we studying it so young? Well, here goes. The branches of anthropology, the study of mankind. You're going to think, why are we studying and starting with secular anthropology? You know, religion books are great, but they start with the faith. And that's not bad either. I mean, yeah, Jesus is enough, right? We don't need to know all this other stuff. But sometimes it's also good to see truth where it is. And when we start with secular anthropology, and this kind of anthropology that looks across cultures, times, and places, we see humanity as having common characteristics. And when we talk about later, if we're made in God's image and we have these common characteristics, what is that going to tell us about God? And then what is that going to tell us about why He made us? That tells us more about ourselves and our purpose. So Catholics believe in faith and reason and science. Nothing in science that is true can contradict anything in the faith, because truth is truth. Okay? That's going to become important later on when we start addressing the creation story in and of itself, because some people might see some inherent contradictions, contradictions, but as we will learn, they're not really contradictions, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Christian anthropology is looking at everything in the light of Jesus, and Catholics are Christian. Right? Not all Christians are Catholic. I love this picture by Salvador Dali. I don't usually like all of his stuff, but this one gives the kind of transcendent picture of looking at the creation in light of Jesus's existence. that God became man and entered into time and space as man. Okay, and that's in that whole divine perspective. Pretty intense, but we do, really everything does make sense in Jesus. It does. Catholic anthropology views things through other lens filters. We use the term in 6th grade God goals, and that idea is being able to look at everything from God's perspective, putting on the mind of Christ. Some aspects of Catholic anthropology and the lenses that we use to view things are, again, we mentioned that faith and reason and science are completely compatible. And this program is pulling on anthropology, those sciences, philosophy, other things. Okay, and it's good. We do not want our religion to be in any kind of way superstitious. It's a very reasonable faith. The way Catholic anthropology approaches Scripture can be different than the way some Christians approach Scripture. Catholics do believe in the historical, critical, exegetical approach. What that means is when we're looking at, say, the story of Genesis, we look at when it was written, what genre it is, an allegorical genre, when it was written, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be important. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Believe it or not, we look through the Jewish perspective. We remember that Jesus was Jewish and the apostles were Jewish. Well, most of them were Jewish. And they would have continued being Jewish had not the Jews said, followers of Jesus can't be Jewish. Okay? And this all happened between 70 and 100 AD. We are fulfilled Jews. So if you go into a traditional Jewish liturgy or a Jewish feast, you're going to see a lot of connections with the Catholic faith. I could do a whole 10-hour video on just the Catholic Mass and its Jewishness. So anyway, in 6th grade, this is also very important because they are studying the Old Testament. And God did choose the Hebrew people in this time and place with their current understandings to teach vital concepts in our understanding of ourselves and others in salvation history. So that's a lens. Ecclesial. Ecclesia means church. And we have confidence that Jesus established the church. It is unchanging. The truths are unchanging. Now, the people in it change a lot and can be really, really corrupt. But the truths of the church, okay, are unchanging. The church, the magisterium, cannot create truth. It just guards it. So that's why in politics, the church will come out and say, this policy does not respect the dignity of the human person's freedom. This policy, yada, yada. It just tells us what in society is compatible with the gospel and what is not. The church can't change truth, can't take it away, can't create it. Okay? It guards the deposit of faith. Catholic anthropology, we also appreciate philosophy. We'll get into that in a minute. But this program, don't get scared, is only going to be using certain terms as they relate to the human person and the Catholic understanding of those terms. Catholic anthropology has a transcendent perspective where it sees truth, beauty, and goodness wherever it is. It doesn't just have to be compartmentalized to the subject of religion or to church on Sunday. Catholic education exists to show how faith integrates with everything. Okay, and wherever there's truth, beauty, and goodness, it is appreciated. Okay, and Catholic anthropology is sacramental. A little bit harder to understand, especially if you're watching this and you're not Catholic, but a sacrament it uses visible realities to communicate the invisible reality of grace. We're going to understand later the human person and our bodies. It is our visible selves that have to communicate for our soul, whether in speech, hand gestures, or whatever. And this understanding of the body and soul is going to be important later on. I'll get to that, of course, later on. Okay, so why study this now? Is this another new fad? Yes and no. No, it's not. We're reclaiming it. So every society has issues. And you might name some issues that you're worried about discussing with your child or in the classroom, whether it be gender theory or immigration or certain policies. Every society has issues. But I would say that our own education as parents and teachers and the textbooks that we give our students, well, you'll see. They don't include some of the things that we're going to be presenting in Catholic Anthropology that will hopefully give them tools to address these issues. So we do know that there never has been a time without issues. There never will be a time without issues. But since truth doesn't change, if we can learn those principles really well, we can navigate through whatever issue might come across our way. There are currently some supplemental religion textbooks starting in the middle grades and in high school that somehow address some of these terms that we'll be introducing: theology of the body, Catholic social teaching. They will all start repeating the terms dignity of the human person, image and likeness of God, so on and so forth. This program is a little bit broader and more basic and includes some philosophical terms that aren't necessarily defined in those. So the philosophical terms on the human person are going to be the same terms that are used in Greek philosophy, but with a different understanding, and it's the church's understanding. And that hasn't changed, okay? And the lack of using this philosophical terminology, and I can tell you some of the reasons why people think that we stopped using it, but a call to do this started with Vatican II, and maybe a little bit before that, actually. Yeah, a little bit before that. And we see it in documents in Humanae Vitae. We see it very much in Fides et Ratio, Veritatis Splendor, and I can give you lots of books and documents. But just trust me, it is saying we have to understand the human person, an appropriate Catholic anthropological understanding of the human person. And that is the purpose of this book. So we mentioned philosophy, and you might be freaking out because you hated that class, or you know that some things are, okay, don't panic. One, everyone's a philosopher, whether you know it or not. And two, we're only going to be covering those terms that are used in philosophy and giving the Catholic terms. This is not a philosophy program, but it is something new in the program, part of it. Okay, it's just a part of it. There are a lot of philosophies out there that are dangerous. And as a matter of fact, John Paul II's The Acting Person was directly going against Descartes' understanding of the human person. And there's a lot of literature on how Nietzsche, that their philosophies are so embedded in society that these issues that happen in society just are what you would expect with those philosophies. So we're trying to do a preemptive strike here and address those terms early in primary grades. This is just interesting to highlight the importance again, is that seminarians have to take philosophy before they take theology. So this program is, instead of just ignoring those philosophical terms, to go ahead and address them, because apparently they're very important, and thinking and asking why and using certain understanding of terms are very important to even how we understand ourselves and how we understand God. So We are incorporating that. Just as a reminder, philosophy is not to be scared of. Children are great philosophers. Why do I have to make my bed if I'm just going to get back in it again? Right? Asking why. Then asking those existential questions that we're going to see that happen in grade school. Well, who am I? What makes me valuable? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? Da 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 da. These are excellent, excellent questions that God made us so we would ask them. And we want to give our students some of the tools and terminology to be able to navigate that. All right, this School of Athens painting by Raphael, 15th century. It's in the Vatican, commissioned by the church. Raphael didn't call it the School of Athens. I don't know. Anyway, so this teaches us a lot of things. One, it shows us that thinking and asking these questions is something that belongs to human nature. God made us this way on purpose. Okay, Anthropology would show that. That truth can be found in so many places. And that's good because they all give different pictures that can broaden our horizons. Okay? And then this is very interesting, and it could be a whole book in itself, and I don't know it all. But this is what I think is a good picture of Catholic education in the sense that the church is appreciating every academic subject that existed at that time, okay, and the asking of questions in that time. And that is good, wherever truth, beauty, and goodness are found. So let's go to the very center of this painting in the School of Athens, and you have Plato and Aristotle, and they're discussing the human person. Go figure. There's some articles out there that says our society is too much of Plato right now, and we might agree to that, but let me explain. They're discussing the human person, and even though Socrates, the older one here, was the teacher of Aristotle, they had different views and approaches. And just to be very simple about it, Plato emphasized the importance of the spiritual. And Aristotle emphasized the importance of reality. So the hand gesture with the earth and the book this way. And, okay. And while the vertical and horizontal, the combination of them is both, then we're going to study that the human person is a unity of the spiritual and the physical. Interesting to note, Thomas Aquinas later came down on the side of Aristotle and says that God created us to learn through our senses, and so that aspect of reality is important. Where Plato might just say, I feel this way, therefore I am this way. And Aristotle is like, just because you feel a certain way, you've got to take into account reality. I'm just not going to go farther into that. But anyway, so this discussion about the human person has been going on a long time, the relationship between the body and the soul going on a long time. And the church, after Jesus and looking at it, has come up with definitive ways of understanding it, and that's what we're dealing with. This is a very simplistic view of how the church has understood and taught this idea of the human person throughout history and where we got to the point where we are right now. So we're going to go from left to right here. We see, Plato and Aristotle arguing against the human person, more spiritual, more physical, more biological, and of course we believe it's a unity of both. Then entering into time, the Word, communication himself, entered into our time and became man. And everything makes sense in Jesus, and I just can't even start there right now. So Jesus came into time. Then from Jesus to the legalization of Christianity, we know it was the time of many martyrs. And they really did not sit down and think about the human person as much, even though they had been affected by Greek philosophy with the Hellenistic influence, long story. But they were all about the person of Jesus, right? And they died for that. Then the legalization of Christianity came along. We know that. And Constantine, he was like, okay, there were actually fights in the street about the Arian heresy going on. There are different heresies trying to understand Jesus is fully God and fully man, or was he more like a demigod? Or was he man that God just came and infused himself into? Or was that man really an illusion and not really a man at all? All these trying to understand the human person, but also God as a person and what all that meant. So the first council was called, and the church at that time, that's where we get our creed, the Council of Nicaea, the Nicene Creed in 325. But continuing after that, the church fathers, if you read them, they would just hash out on all these philosophical things that would be hard for us to read right now. The nature, the essence of all these aspects of faith, the Trinity, free will. Anyway, so we have a lot. From 325, maybe 800-ish or whatever, very academic time in the church where these things were being hashed out. Then through all the different battles, the Huns and everything else like that, we entered into what many call the Dark Ages. And at that time, since education was not readily available, they weren't hashing things out and breaking them down as much. The faith tended to become a little bit more superstitious, okay, and maybe even scared of science at some point in time. And I don't know why, but anyway, it happened. Coming out of the Dark Ages, now we're here with good old Thomas Aquinas in the 12th century. He and scholasticism was coming up, and academics were starting to get more. He was writing in a very superstitious time, okay, and in a sense, he wrote the Summa and many, many other things, and showed how faith and reason are completely compatible, and that we need not be afraid of truth wherever it's found, including in the Greek philosophers, okay. Then he went out and systematically, if you know anything about the Summa, I can't even go into it right now, but it's just a systematic, logical progression of showing how the faith, and he's using reason, it makes sense, okay? And he takes all the arguments, as we know, against a certain truth, and then argues against those arguments. So he made faith into a science. He showed how they were compatible. He reinvigorated the philosophical discussions that needed to happen. Okay, so we have this whole period where the church is becoming more academic and more involved, but we also know that wherever you have people, right? And not everyone in the church, I don't think there's ever been a time where everyone's been perfect, right? We had bad church members, people at that time, in the 15th century, 14th century, wanted to get into the church for the wrong reasons, the political power, so on and so forth, whatever. 1517, October 31st, we know that the Protestant Reformation, that's the time we get. What happened with the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic understanding of the human person is that the Catholic Church's time and energies went more to defending the faith, the creed, and the sacraments, and getting rid of those things that were bad, like nepotism and all these other things, okay? So that time of reform in the church, we weren't focusing on the human person as much. We keep going on a few hundred years, and of course science, we're just getting exponentially better at everything. And so happens the Industrial Revolution, right? And in 1891, at the height of the Industrial Revolutions, we see a lot of abuses of the human person. happening on many different realms. So in 1891, the church put out its first Catholic social teaching document, Rerum Novarum, and has been putting out social documents since. And that gave us, Catholic social teaching, gospel principles applied to modern day situations, sometimes using new words to illustrate gospel principle. Okay, so that has been happening, and the height of the human person and the importance of the human person is made in the image and likeness of God, and the dignity of the human person since 1891 has been in those kinds of documents. All right, so let's move on. In the 20th century, a lot of powerhouses in the church came up, a lot of powerful historical documents that we're still unpacking with Vatican II surrounding a little bit before and then afterwards. Pope Paul VI, still controversial, but Humanae Vitae is a very prophetic document. And he says if your understanding of this part of the human person doesn't change, you're going to be in trouble. And he was right. John Paul II, he is prolific. Not only Love and Responsibility that he wrote before he was Pope, The Acting Person that he wrote in response to bad philosophies. We know that as Pope, he promulgated Veritatis et Splendor, Splendor of Truth, Fides et Ratio. Okay. We also know that in his Wednesday Angelus audiences, he gave us the theology of the body, unpacking the story of Genesis and the image of God that we are going to have another video on because it's just so rich, right? So all these things in Fides et Ratio and Veritatis et Splendor, they said we must get back to our logical understanding, combining anthropology and a philosophical understanding of the human person. If not, society's understanding will prevail, and the human person will not be treated well. Okay? All right. So this whole Catholic anthropology thing is not just about philosophy. It's a part of it, but I had to explain why it is a part of it. And remember, not all philosophies are good. Many are in contradiction. This program is going to only be dealing with the basic terms, and all the actual terms that are used go back to Greek philosophy. And they're different than what Plato and Aristotle taught. They're a fuller understanding that has not changed. The church has said, this is the understanding. Okay, and so we'll be going through those, and we start in kindergarten with those terms so that they hopefully later on can become natural ways of thinking. Okay, so why are we introducing it in kindergarten and through 6th grade? Well, let's take advantage of the science of psychology, all right? Because where there's truth, it's great. Many of you may be aware, I know educators would be, that there are different stages of development, moral development, Erik Erikson's is a very popular, his stages of psychosocial development seem to ring true with most people. And what we see in all stages of development is that in our grade school years, we are growing in our understanding of self at a very vulnerable time. We're constantly growing in our understanding of selves. We're not saying it ever stops, but our understanding of ourselves can almost, it's hard to undo when it starts young. Okay, so we want to start young and helping our young people realize what makes them value, so that when they get to the difficult middle school and adolescent years, hopefully they have a better foundation and a security in themselves and their view of others, where they can just simply recognize when something's not compatible with that. Okay. We all know we want our students to know that they're loved and to be confident in that. And really, that's the goal of this program. Another modern psychological, thing is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. This is almost kind of putting John Paul II's acting person into, anyway. But this is a secular approach that many counselors would take. I personally think it's a great thing for anyone to do. It's kind of like it's good for anyone to take a personality test to know a little bit more about their personality and others' personalities and how they relate. This is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's saying, let's start with your behavior and then figure out why you have that inclination towards that behavior. It's trying to get to your core belief, your core philosophy, okay? Your core understanding of yourself, your core understanding of how you relate to others, how you relate to specific things. So really our core philosophy, even in psychology, getting down, we probably don't even know why we do some of the things we do. One of my bad philosophies that I have to overcome is that I judge myself according to my usefulness. That's not good, really. That's not good. So I'm a workaholic or whatever, and all these things. So anyway, your core beliefs and your core philosophies of who you are and who others are begins very young, okay? And so another reason why we are addressing this very young. And we're also, you might see over here, addressing the role of feelings and thoughts and actions. And actually, those are philosophical things that we're talking about. It's our intellect, our will, and our emotions, and our choices, and our free will, and how we use that. I love this quote from Fides et Ratio. And again, I have to emphasize that we want to take advantage and show that the faith is credible in every field. And we have no reason to be afraid of any science if something is true. The first sentence in Fides et Ratio, I'm just going to read it. Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. And God has placed in the human heart a desire to know the truth. In a word, to know himself, so that by knowing and loving God, men and women may also come to the fullness of truth about themselves. It's a great statement for the program that we're trying to do. So we are approaching everything from the Catholic worldview, as we mentioned before, our God goals, putting on the mind of Christ, trying to see all things as he sees them, and why we are the way we are. And even if we don't like the way we are, we need to like the way we are, because that's how God made us, the way we are, and he made us that way on purpose. All right, as he did everyone else. Okay, yeah, this is religion. So what's the main theological point in this? It's probably two. I would say the main point of all religion is communion. And by communion, we mean relationship, just a very profound relationship. Okay? God is communion in the Trinity, and he made us for communion. God, who is love, made us through love and for love. Religion is not about rules. It's about relationship. So I have done this. This is a personal thing. I've done this when I taught in middle school or high school. I've taught in college. I've done this at a community college and with classes of nurses. Okay, I do this activity, and I think I'm risking something, but as human nature is the same wherever, the conclusions always come out the same. So we put, and if we were in person, we could do this in groups. We get in groups, and then we ask the groups to pretend that a couple's been married for 10 years. What kind of expectations does that couple have of each other? Even if they're not articulated, okay? You get your wedding vows, that's nice, but the practical expectations. So like, let's just say, one expectation that usually comes up, or you wish was stated, is that my spouse will not spend a lot of our money without asking me first. That kind of expectation. So what happens, show you the next slide, so exciting. What happens is that the expectations that the groups come up with are all similar. Then when you write them down on those pieces of paper and then you hang them everywhere, you can draw lines, literally draw lines from the expectations someone has of the other person and the 10 Commandments. Because the 10 Commandments are not rules. They're really just kind of like what we naturally expect in relationships. So if we expect this from each other, that's the way our relationship is with God. So you can look through these. It's all tied together in the Catechism when it goes through the commandments. Excuse me. Number 4 talks about family life. Number 5 talks about life itself. Number 6, where it talks about our sexuality and marriage. Number 7 talks all about money and economy. Number 8 talks about communication. Okay. My point is that God made every person with us and these expectations. And when we look at ourselves and look at the natural law and look at the expectations everyone has of each other throughout the centuries, we're going to learn a little bit more about God and what he wants of us. And that, wait a minute, he's not giving us rules. He's kind of reminding us that it's all about relationship. Religion is all about relationship, not rules. Billboard. Okay. The other important theological concept, faith concept that is going to be driven home is what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God. And that's going to be a whole other video because there's a lot to it. And it can't even be covered in the other video, but we're going to try to start. Okay. So all these things we've tried to integrate with the current themes in the religion year and in the social studies theme. Social studies is a great place for religion because social studies is all about creation and the human person. That's religion, right? So in these years, we try to stay with the developmental age and to stay within the theme that they are already studying that year, okay? So that's why we're not going to be talking anything about Old Testament scriptures or anything until we hit 6th grade, because 6th grade in religion, you study Old Testament and you also study Eastern religions and the development of civilization and so on and so forth. So the questions correlate to, hopefully correlate to the subjects and integrate with them and make it easier and less work. You'll see terms in here that are both theological and terms that are big words from Catholic social teaching. Students love to learn a big word, so we're just using big words, okay? So in summary, this program is using aspects of Catholic philosophy on the human person, and many of those things differ from society, and that's why it's important to learn. Believe it or not, we believe there are objective truths and objective moral realities, and society may not. May just think everything's a matter of opinions, relativism. That good and evil are realities, again, not necessarily a view in society. Virtue is important. To understand the role of feelings, intellect, and will, and how they relate to each other and how they relate to you making your choices. You should not act on your feelings right away. You should think before you act, right? We're going to be talking about that and why. The understanding of love. Hallmark is nice, but the reality of love is hard. It's a choice that is hard of self-gift, and kind of understanding the distinctions in love that our American language doesn't necessarily give us. The understanding of body and soul as a unity. It's kind of hard to understand, and we don't necessarily expect them to understand it right away, but we're going to keep repeating it because it's an important thing, and especially in today's society, which we'll be talking about in the other video on terms, on how society's understanding of that differs from the Catholic understanding. That we need to form our conscience, our way of thinking, that we learn through our senses, that truth, beauty, and goodness are transcendentals. All these things are discussed in philosophy and mentioned in this and more, mentioned in the Catholic Anthropology program. This program attempts to appreciate the stage of child development, okay? Definitely has a goal of them growing in the proper sense of self and their relationship to others. And that their choices and habits they make of choices, which is virtue, good habit, are really important for their own development. Also, we understand that anthropology, if we're made in the image and likeness of God, the more we understand about us, okay, we can understand God. And so we, in anthropology, it comes to fruition, slowly introduced at each grade level, in the last grade level. But for instance, these listed here are anthropological conclusions. There's so many more, right? I can't even go into language and how God is the Word who became flesh. Anyway, that mankind across cultures is a religious being. You can know by reason that God exists, that He's supreme, and that worship is needed, and that worship, that whole idea of sacrifice, you'll see, whether it's in the Aztecs or whatever, is there somewhere. So God made us religious beings. We are also social beings because God made us for relationship. And He wants us to learn the ins and outs of relationship, because that will reflect the ins and outs of our understanding of our relationship with God and who He is. We value loyal infidelity, right? Well, why? In a relationship, because that's who God is. We're going to unpack the term rational animals. Yes, we belong to the animal kingdom, but what does it mean that we're rational animals? Anthropology will show us that we have a reasoning process, an understanding that is immaterial, okay, and transcendent. Okay, we have an understanding of the natural law, which shows us that basically in the natural law we see things as good. So therefore there are goods. Okay, that this natural law thing is not just, as some might say, a continued psychological progression, what do you call it? Projection of our needs. Mankind, everyone, we just desire happiness. It's across the board. Why? St. Augustine says, you made us for yourself, O Lord, so our hearts will be restless until they rest in you. And He made us that way on purpose. He made us restless on purpose and constantly desiring happiness on purpose. Why? So we'll keep searching for Him who will bring us happiness. Mankind desires, always chooses what that man at that time sees as good. No one ever says, I'm going to do this because I think it's evil. And then mankind desires progress. That is another showing us who God is, that in the principle of gradation, He's perfection and creator. I could go on. But the idea is that when we look at all these things about humanity, we come to realize that this is done on purpose. And what does all this tell us? Well, all this tells us that we are made for relationship with Him. Sorry, this was one of the longer videos. Thank you for listening through all of this. Let us hope and pray that our students and ourselves, that we can continue to grow in the love of God and help others to grow in the love of God. So thanks for listening.